The BBSRC contacts for this call are myself and James Phillips, who will be speaking a little bit later in the webinar. So feel free to contact us at the email address on the screen if questions arise after the webinar. We encourage you to ask questions, so please put these into the chat function throughout the webinar, and we will answer them during the Q&A session at the end. Any unanswered questions will be answered after the webinar by email. In terms of the agenda today, after an overview of the call from me, we will have an introduction from James Phillips, who is the Senior Portfolio Manager leading on the agri-food sector within the Business Interaction Unit of BBSRC. This is followed by 2 talks from industry and academia about the industrial challenges and scientific opportunities relating to crop pest and disease research. James and I will then take you through how to apply to the call and the call scope before we have Jenna Watts from AHDB talking through some of the pest and disease targets. We will end the webinar with our Q&A session. So I'm now going to do a brief overview of the call. Because of the need for new controls of crop pests and diseases, we are inviting proposals to test approaches and develop strategies to improve the understanding, management and control of crop pests and diseases, which are a significant threat to UK crop production. These projects will bring together businesses in partnerships with academics to address crop pests and diseases which are of direct relevance to farmers and growers. The proposals will be assessed on scientific quality and strategic relevance. We will be going through the call scope and assessment process in a bit more detail later on. There is a total of £2 million available, and we expect the awards to be around 20 to 50,000. In terms of duration, we're expecting the projects to be around 6 months in length, with the latest end date being the 31st of December 2023. In your proposal, you should address at least one of the following list of challenge areas: the fundamental study of the biology of pests and diseases, prevention and biosecurity, detection and forecasting, developing novel controls and approaches, and the development of integrated pest management approaches. Weeds may be investigated as part of a pest and disease complex. My colleague James will be talking about the challenge areas in a bit more detail later. Just before I hand over to James, I want to give a brief summary of why this call is so important. Worldwide, an estimated 20 to 40% of yield is lost to crop pests and diseases. And for this reason, UK community strategies and roadmaps, such as the 10-year roadmap for UK plant science, the National Food Strategy, and DEFRA's land management scheme advise that developing new controls and approaches for pests and diseases are a priority as part of moving to more sustainable agricultural and horticultural systems. As we are all aware, farmers, growers, and the wider supporting sector is experiencing multiple pressures, leading to potentially decreased resilience to further production shocks, such as pest and disease outbreaks. And this is why BBSRC is investing £2 million to support the formation of partnerships for innovation-focused research about crop pests and diseases. We want to invest to improve capabilities to manage current and emerging threats, and this will support the resilience of the sector and the progression towards a more sustainable agriculture and horticulture. The call scope is focused upon threats identified in the UK National Risk Register exercise, which was led by AHDB, and in direct consultation with farmers and growers. The call builds upon a successful pilot initiative in 2019, also supported by AHDB. So this call is part of BBSRC's collaborative R&D budget, and so James will now be giving the wider context about how BBSRC engages with business.
Thank you very much, Mary, and thank you so much to everyone for taking part in the webinar today. Great to see so many familiar names and new ones as well on the call. So next slide, please, Mary. Thank you. So I'm just going to have a few slides here just to go through BBSRC, just who we are in case you haven't heard of us before, and just to give some context about this funding and how it fits in with wider BBSRC strategy. So BBSRC is the Biotechnology and Biological Sciences Research Council. We're one of 9 bodies that make up UKRI, which is the UK's research and innovation agency. BSLC is technically the UK's largest public funder of agriculture and food research within the context of UKRI. So next slide, please. Okay, so BBSLC's strategic plan is set out in our forward look for UK bioscience. Today, the funding that we're focusing on is all about tackling strategic challenges. So it's that second theme where we talk about bioscience for sustainable agriculture and food. Within that theme, we absolutely see crop health in its broadest sense as being a really major priority for BBSLC and for the UK more broadly. We're also focusing on building strong foundations, particularly connecting people, enabling collaborations, partnerships, and knowledge exchange. Next slide, please. The other big piece of context here is the overall commitment from UK government to actually increase R&D across the UK from the current level, which is about 1.7%, up to 2.4% in the long run. The idea of this is ultimately for the UK to become more competitive and be able to compete, as I said, with other countries in the OECD group that we would normally see ourselves in comparison with. Thank you very much. Next slide. So BBSLC is part of this overall government initiative, and within BBSLC we have the Business Interaction Unit that both Mary and myself are based in. It's a relatively small team, but with a very clear vision and mission to help connect businesses into the academic research base across the UK, enabling those businesses to thrive, enabling bioscience research and innovation to be fully exploited in order to improve lives and boost economic growth across the UK. Next slide, please. This slide just goes through how, as a team, we seek to work with business, and this extends to BBSLC as a whole. So we seek to strengthen partnerships with business. This can involve engaging with them to help shape, inform, and promote national strategy and policy across BBSLC, UKRI, and government. Business has been consulted very extensively in the design of this particular initiative, hoping that that will lead through to some really great partnerships and collaborations. We're always seeking to help businesses to grow and thrive, again, through co-design, co-investment, and co-delivery. Bringing that back to this initiative, we are absolutely looking for industry partners, and we're very focused as part of the assessment process on ensuring that the projects that do come through have that strong industrial relevance. We also support businesses with bespoke research and innovation insight. So if you are a business or you have business contacts who you think would benefit direct engagement into UK government, please do get in touch. Very happy to facilitate that. We're always thinking about how we can enable businesses to partner, invest in, and inform our investments very broadly. That connects through to the next generation talent that will underpin the success of biosciences as well. Finally, we also seek to provide businesses with opportunities to meet new academic collaborators as well, and often run networking events and engagement activities as well, which we're likely to do as part of this funding initiative in due course. Next slide. There we go. So I'll hand back to Mary at this point, I think.
Thank you for that, James. We're now going to move on to a presentation from Roma Gwyn of Biorationale about the industry challenges within the sector and the importance of collaboration. Please do let me know if the sound doesn't work.
Hello. I'd like to share ideas I have about how to develop an enduring crop protection for a stable agro-ecosystem. So we sit and think about this and reflect upon this. This is a beautiful picture. It's a beautiful landscape. It's really well managed. But then if we reflect upon it and think a little bit further and saying, yes, it is beautiful, but it's a highly managed landscape. How much space have we left for nature? How diverse is this landscape? And as you start to reflect on it and think, well, how did we get to this point? Well, we got to this point because in the 1950s and 60s, we had a real and urgent need to feed the world. And we did that very well. And we did that very well by having a high input fertilizer, pesticide, and plant variety system. And it was highly successful. But somehow, over time, we seem to have drifted away. We were doing quite a good job of feeding people, but we drifted away and started to think, well, but we're doing harm. We've changed the landscapes dramatically. We're putting things into the system which our environment's having trouble coping with. So what do we do about this? And this is when we start to say, well, we're starting to do unacceptable harm, and we don't want to do that anymore. We want to manage that. And we can see that there's a policy change globally, and that policy change was enshrined in things like the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And what they have done there is say, we want to feed people. We want to feed people in a way that isn't contributing to climate harm. It isn't causing to harm in the environment, and it's not causing undue harm to the natural environment. And we see that Europe reflects this in the same way in their farm to fork strategy in the current EU Parliament, where there's a desire to have a neutral or positive environmental effect to help to mitigate climate change, to reverse the loss of biodiversity, but at the same time, make sure that everyone has access to sufficient, safe, nutritious and sustainable food. So we're starting to question about how we grow food, but at the same time, we have a monoculture. So we know the model's not working, but we're still working with a monoculture. And as biologists and ecologists, we know that monocultures are inherently unstable. So we're saying we've sort of got this model of agriculture and it's inherently unstable. And thinking, well, what do we do about that? How do we manage that? And then we add to this what we know is that 30 to 40% of the crops are lost before harvest and 10 after harvest. So it says the model we're using isn't working. So what do we do? How do we change that? Well, we need to change that by using some best practice crop protection solutions, and increasingly we can see that the mainstay of this best practice is biological or biocontrol technologies. And this is reflected, we see this happening in the real world because we can see the global markets for biocontrol technologies increasing really fast. They're moving at a rate, the compound annual growth rate is estimated to be over some people saying 14%, some people over 20%. But this compares to 3-5% for conventional chemical pesticides. So whilst there's a very small start for this technology, it's moving fast now. And just all the signs are we're at a tipping point where it's going to really start to move even faster. So technologies I'm talking about, macroorganisms, microorganisms, botanical substances, and xenochemicals. They have all sorts of different names, but broadly biocontrol technologies. We might tend to think of these as being new, something that we've just invented, but biocontrol technologies have been around since the 1960s, and there's continued to be invention and development of them across time and even today. So these aren't new. What is different is the amount that they're used, and that's changing. And we can see that in the European Union, that of the plant protection active substances that are approved, over 40% of those now are biocontrol technologies. And since 2016, there's been more biocontrol technology applications coming forward than for conventional chemical pesticides. So these are all signs that what we're doing in crop protection is changing, and changing fast and changing significantly. What's also changing is the desire to use these technologies with an integrated pest management system. Integrated pest is a new technology. It's been around since the 1950s, but the principles of using agronomic practice first, monitoring and forecasting, using physical and natural interventions, and then biological interventions as the mainstays and underpinning of integrated pest management is the principle, and then finally coming with the chemical interventions. Now, this is the reverse triangle of what we've been doing for the last 30, 40, 50 years. It's to move across to this practice. And what we've been seeing happening is the biocontrols used in this system in what I'd say is a very binary way, is we have a pest, we have the biocontrol agent, and we throw one against the other and they die. And this is using biocontrol as a chemical replacement. It's taking that exact same model that has been used for the last sort of 50 or 60 years, and we're just swapping out chemicals for biocontrol agents. But that's not changing the model, and we fundamentally need to change the model. And what these biocontrol technologies do is they give us the opportunity to change the model. They're the tools by which we change the models. So as biologists and ecologists, we know that the plant has a really complex interactions with its biotic and its abiotic environment. And its biotic environment is it's interacting with herbivores, it's interacting with the microbiome around it, and they interact with the plant, and the plant's able to interact with them by producing alarm compounds, by biosynthesizing phytochemicals, stimulating plant defense mechanisms. All of these abilities the plants have to respond to what's happening around them. But have we lost those? How do we use them? I think biocontrol is a real opportunity to bring together the ability of plants and the ability of biocontrol agents. And to illustrate that, there's some sort of work that it was kind of this sort of moment where a penny drops inside my head. So it's a paper published in 2005. And what they looked at was if you damage a maize plant, it's not able to do this, but if a maize plant is damaged by an insect, the maize sends out a signal to recruit its biocontrol agent, entomopathogenic nematodes, to come and kill the corn borer. Kind of smart, and I know there's been some papers since which have disputed that, which have looked at different approaches, saying it's more complex. But what's really interesting in the paper is that some maize varieties can do that, and some maize varieties can't. And that gets you thinking, saying, so can we breed plants that have a better ability to interact with the biocontrol agents, either by the plant recruiting the biocontrol agent, by the plant being able to husband the microorganisms in and around its system. And what we know is, yes, we can do that. That research is ongoing at the moment, and there's a real potential to do that. And I think this is interesting. Instead of breeding plants to have resistance genes to the disease in a very simple way, is thinking of plants in much more in an ecological way and bringing together all those components of the ecology, and that we've got the tools to do that now, and we can move away from this very binary thinking into a much more holistic thinking. And another example is this work that was published a few years ago is a really lovely piece of work. So we think of the microorganism trichoderma, and Trichoderma atrovirida is something that we can put onto the roots of plants, and when we put it on the roots of plants, it protects against the disease, and it can have it does that by colonizing the roots, and so there's no space for the disease. It does that by direct hyperparasitism. It does that by stimulating the plant to be a healthier plant. But what this paper shows is really quite interesting. So they put trichoderma on the roots of maize, and the treated plants then had the ability to send out a signal to recruit a natural enemy to come and kill the insect pest. So this isn't just binary, this is tertiary and higher level interactions that are going on. And the challenge for us is, can we capture that, and how do we use that, and how do we turn that into something that farmers can use? But it shows that we really need to challenge our thinking about what crop protection, what plant protection is, and how to use it. And another example here, this is a project in Norway where they found that wheat produces a pheromone which attracts lacewings, and the lacewings come in and eat the aphids. So you've got here a pheromone that's been produced. It doesn't kill anything. What it does is it manages the population of the natural enemy. But you can take this a little bit further and think, well, if we're managing the population of the natural enemy, bringing all these lacewings in, where are the lacewings coming from? What's happening in the next door field? So we started to think a bit more on a landscape scale. So what they did then was to adapt to that by putting in flower margins to create habitats to encourage the lacewings, to enrich the area of these wheat fields, and put in things like little winter housing so they can overwinter well. So what you have then is you have a plant protection system which isn't directly killing anything. It's managing the population by managing a natural enemy, and it's enhancing the ecosystem. So you're starting to build an ecosystem service. And this is the true goal of what we're trying to do in crop protection, and that we can do it, but we just need to think a little bit more as biologists and ecologists and think more holistically and not this binary way. It's much more complex, it's much more difficult, but it is it will be rewarding. And I think what we're then doing is taking that unstable monoculture that you have and make it a much more complex monoculture by the interventions that we put in, by changing the plant varieties and having mixtures of plant varieties, by not necessarily directly killing the pest, by helping the plants defend themselves more. And all this coming together is really what biocontrol is about and what the future is. But how are we going to get there? Well, in Brazil, they've already started to get there. So Brazil, we think of it as a country in which they a heavy use of pesticides, etc. But maybe we should challenge our thoughts on that. So in Brazil, they've got about 77.4 million hectares of production, of plant production. And of that, 10 million are treated now with biocontrol, which is really quite incredible. It's not what we think about as Brazil agriculture, but that's what's happening. And of that 10 million hectares that are treated, 98% of the farmers who used the biocontrol products in 2018 crop year said they would use them again. That's a really high level of satisfaction. And I think that's really startling to show us that we need to challenge our concepts of what crop protection is, what crop protection can do, that it's not niche product, it can be used on broad acre. But to get there is going to be difficult. It's very, very complex. We've got to change our thinking, we've got to change our crop protection model, and it's very multidisciplinary. We need to bring all these disciplines together to achieve this. And yes, we do also need the chemists in there, but in a different way to the way we used them before. We need to bring all these elements together. So I hope in this short presentation that I've inspired you to think about crop protection, and that it's realistic that we can move into this new crop protection model, that we have the research tools now to do it, we have the desire on the farmers to do it, we have the policy environment to do it, and that we're right at the beginning of a very, very rapid change. And it's going to be a great journey to be on, and I hope you will take part in that journey. Thank you very much.
Many thanks to Roma for that fantastic presentation. So similarly, we're going to hear from Toby Bruce, who is a professor of insect chemical ecology at Keele University, about the scientific opportunities relating to crop pest and disease research.
Hello, everyone. I'm Toby Bruce from Keele University, and I'd like to give an overview of the challenge of protecting crops from pests, weeds and diseases. So we all know that the Green Revolution has led to these wonderful high-yielding varieties of crops, but that high yield is contingent on having good crop protection. And if you don't have the good crop protection, then it's hard to realize that theoretical high yield. And an agricultural ecosystem is actually a very unnatural environment. So it's a human-managed environment, often with the crops being grown outside their area of origin in large uniform stands with high frequency of disturbance. There's a number of characteristics of the plants themselves too. They've been selected for high yield and good quality and taste, and other characteristics making them easier to harvest. But so some of this selection has gone through bottlenecks, reducing the gene pool of the crop germplasm, and some of the resistance traits that existed in the wild plants may have been lost during this process. And we have these simplified, often monoculture environments where there's a really large area of a particular crop, which can be very very vulnerable to attack by an adapted pest, weed, or disease. These lush monocultures, they're just what these adapted organisms like to eat as well. So in effect, they're competing with us for the food supply. There's a diagram here that shows some of the factors at play. And to a large extent, a lot of the high-yielding varieties that were grown and developed during the Green Revolution have been propped up by the use of readily available and often effective synthetic pesticides. But that is changing now as the availability of those is less, and as these pests are now evolving resistance at a faster rate than new solutions are coming on the market. So we have this very vulnerable environment, as I already outlined, and it needs new approaches and new tools to protect the crops. And this is all about what this new BBSSC Crop Pest and Disease Initiative is all about. Is finding the new solutions, and farmers need these new solutions. These are some farmer and agronomist feedback information from recent Sustainable Agriculture Research and Innovation Club project, where we had Crop Protect app, which was providing information about pests and diseases to farmers and agronomists. But the nice thing about it is that it had a two-way flow of information. So we had the users reporting what their priorities were, and it was very clear that the crop protection targets of most concern are the ones where there's recently been a removal of the effective pesticide, such as with the cabbage stem flea beetle, which wasn't really a pest until after the neonicotinoid restriction, or there's been evolution of pesticide resistance, such as with the blackgrass, which is notorious for having evolved resistance to all currently available herbicides. So we have a challenge. These are some of the examples. There's the blackgrass that's it means that in large areas of the UK you can't grow wheat as a winter crop. It needs to be grown in the spring to try and avoid the blackgrass. Then there's this field which has been treated with a triazole fungicide, but it's still got a heavy attack of septoria because the septoria has evolved resistance to it. There's major problems in establishing oilseed rape crops because these cabbage stem flea beetles come in and they gobble up the young seedlings. Oilseed rape is a very good crop at compensatory regrowth, but it doesn't stand a chance at this very early growth stage when the cabbage stem flea beetle comes to attack. And so a lot of the fields, they just need to be ploughed up, and they can't be grown with oilseed rape. So these are major crops and big crop protection challenges. So new solutions are urgently needed, and so we need an innovation system to deliver that, and that starts with research. Is why this type of strategic research is required. And there's opportunities to develop new solutions. So considering some of these broad areas, can crop environments be made less suitable for pests? Can plant resistance to pests be improved? And can the impact of natural enemies be increased? So it's looking at a bottom-up approach from having the crop resistance, and also a top-down approach by having the natural enemies of the pests to see if you can use these to reduce pest populations. It's very much an ecological question, but we need to have the interventions that can help to address the balance and make the system less vulnerable to pests. And we need practical solutions that farmers can use. I've got a couple of examples I'll briefly show from research which has made a difference. So with collaborative research that I was lucky to be involved with, we developed orange wheat blossom midge resistance in collaboration with British wheat breeders. This was a very large collaborative project involving ADAS, John Innes Centre, Rothamsted, British wheat breeders, a large consortium of organisations, but has had some nice practical solutions. So these orange wheat blossom midge resistant varieties, they don't get this very nasty damage that the midge does, causing shrivelling, pre-sprouting, affecting quality as well as yield, and facilitating secondary fungal infections. In 2004, 10% of the UK wheat harvest was lost from this pest, so it could do a lot of damage, and there was a lot of insurance spraying going on, just putting on an insecticide just to try and avoid any damage, because it can do such a lot of damage. But if you grow a resistant variety, it doesn't have the damage from the pest. It's one of the best things I've seen in the field in terms of pest resistance. It's near 100%, and it seems to form a wounds plug where the midge is feeding, and it doesn't have development of the larvae, these grubs that do the damage to the wheat grains. It's a very nice way of controlling the pest, because it actually makes life easier for the farmer, because you don't have all the trouble of checking the fields and putting on a pesticide spray, because if you have one of these resistant varieties, then the problem is already solved. And it seems to even work as kind of dead end trap crop for the pest, because it's still attracted to it. It still lays eggs on it, but the eggs don't develop into these damaging larvae. And there's now about 40% of the UK wheat has got that resistance, which is a very good thing, because the most effective insecticide that used to be used was chlorpyrifos, and that's no longer available, because that's been banned now. The other thing with orange wheat blossom midge was developing very sensitive pheromone monitoring traps. So these are baited with the sex pheromone of the midge, and it gives farmers an early warning of when the fields are at risk if you're growing a susceptible variety. And this gives the farmers the confidence not to spray, because if they don't see midges in the trap, then they can relax about it, and they don't need to worry about putting on an insurance spray to be on the safe side, because it's already pretty clear that the midge is not going to be a problem. And that's very useful, because 4 out of 5 years the midge emergence doesn't coincide with when the wheat is at the susceptible growth stage. So it's not necessary in most years to put a spray on. It all depends on the timing of the emergence of this insect, and whether it hits the time when the wheat is at a very narrow window between the splitting of the boots and the starting of flowering. If the midges are around at that time, then it's at risk. But if the midge comes out at a different time, then it's not a problem. And collaboration with HGCA, we developed this decision support system for the midge. So HGCA was a sponsor. It's now the AHDB, but this is going back to the days when there was a DEFRA HGCA Sustainable Arable Link. And this decision support system, it makes it very straightforward of the kind of various thresholds and what farmers need to do for using the pheromone traps for monitoring the pests. But of course, if you're growing resistant variety, then you don't need to worry about it at all, and that's problem solved. Another interesting example is companion cropping. This was originally developed with long-standing collaboration between ISAPI and Rothamsted. For stem borers and also striga, but more recently we found that this also works against the fall armyworm, and that's a new invasive pest in Africa. So this companion cropping system, this picture shows early in the season, where before the maize has actually grown the main crop. But you can see the companion crops. There's an intercrop of desmodium, and that releases volatiles, which repels the insect pest, the moths that lay the eggs that develop into these damaging caterpillars. And those are repelled by the odours of the companion crop. There's also a border crop of Bracharia, which has a similar function. We've shown that it actually repels the fall armyworm moths, but both of these crops, companion crops, they attract the natural enemies, so it has a double effect. It repels the pest and it attracts the natural enemy, and that gives very effective prevention of fall armyworm pest damage. And these are data from actual farmers' fields. So that was another nice research success story, which has led to practical implementation. Another topic. Time is very limited. We could talk for a long time about this, but there is an opportunity to take genes from crop wild relatives using GM approaches and put them into the elite crops. And that, for example, with the blight resistance with Jonathan Jones' group at the Sainsbury Laboratory, that could lead to crops which no longer need fungicide application if society is willing to grow and eat these crops. But that's an interesting question about kind of rewilding of the crops by integrating the genes from crop wild relatives. But there's some debate about the GM crops, of course, and time is too limited to go into that right now. But from a technical point of view, it's highly effective. There's growth in the market, so there's demand for new solutions. So over the years, as there's been a decline in innovation with traditional, conventional, synthetic toxic pesticides, there's been large increases in development of biological controls, biopesticides and biostimulants. So there's and also resistant crop varieties. There's greater interest amongst farmers in having resistant crop varieties as they can't get the control they used to get from the pesticides. So there's a market opportunity, and so this actually makes business sense, as well as being of great interest scientifically. So there's an opportunity here, and it's to protect this highly vulnerable environment that we have with the cropping environments that are highly vulnerable to pests. If there's no crop protection, then you can get this exponential growth in pest populations, and so something needs to be done about that. I mean, in a natural ecosystem, the natural enemies might keep pace, but these pests, they've got such high population growth rates that it's hard for the natural enemies to keep pace with them, and so something needs to be done to encourage them, and it's been done up until now. I mean, it hasn't really been so much of biological control. It's been more just application of synthetic toxic pesticides to protect the crops. But as that's becoming less of an option, as there's been restrictions in the availability of pesticides, and also as the pests evolve resistance, then there's a need to find new solutions. There's a need for research to develop new tools in the toolbox that farmers can use to protect their crops. It's in the context of a couple of big picture considerations. So how can we conserve biodiversity while also providing food security? So these are huge global challenges, and by reducing crop losses to pests, then we can help to reduce the amount of land which is required for farming. And but these crop protection interventions, they need to be done in a way to minimise off-target effects on beneficial insects, such as the natural enemies of pests, and of course the pollinators of crops. And the other major consideration is, how can we sustainably intensify agriculture? So this is an intensification which it's done in an environmentally friendly way, but it means that not more land is used for, and not more water, and not a bigger environmental footprint for farming. So this is a huge challenge, and it's hard to see how that could be delivered if we're getting increased losses to pests as the crop protection options are diminished. So it's highly important to find new sustainable, effective but environmentally friendly solutions for crop pest management. We need to develop new tools for crop protection. So I've given a few examples of possible things that could be done in this overview. So natural enemies to combat the insect pests, resistant crop varieties, cultural control measures such as the push-pull companion cropping, and also monitoring systems and better targeting of the pesticides themselves to minimise their use. So thanks very much for listening. We definitely need innovative research to deliver these new options for crop protection, and I'm very happy to hear that this call is coming out, so that there can be research being done on this front. So thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you to Toby for another excellent presentation. And I really hope these presentations have emphasised the importance of research and innovation in this area and why we're running this call. We're now going to have a 5-minute screen break before James and I will take you through how to apply to the call and the call scope. So we will restart at 1:49. Thank you.
Hello.
So I'm now going to go through how to apply in a bit more detail. As I mentioned earlier, there is £2 million available for the Partnerships to Address Crop Pests and Diseases call. We are expecting to award between 20 and 50,000, so that would equate to around 40 accepted proposals. And the earliest start date would be the 1st of January 2023, with the expected duration of around 6 months. But that can change dependent on the crop pest or disease that you're investigating. The latest end date for the projects will be the 31st of December 2023, meaning that if you're doing a 6-month project, the latest start date for you would be the 30th of June 2023. As in standard BBSRC grants, we will cover 80% full economic cost, with your research organisation covering the last 20%. For this call, we require you to have a business partner. Businesses which are UK-based or which have a UK-based research activity will be eligible. Business partners include, but are not limited to, farmers and growers, agribusinesses and innovators, agronomists and practitioners, and data management service providers. If you have a specific question relating to business partner eligibility, then feel free to email us or pop the question to the chat. Businesses cannot be directly funded through this call, so please see the separate guidance on our website regarding subcontractors. We require a 50% contribution from business partners, whether that is an individual business or a group of businesses. This is required to be made up of a 10% cash contribution and a 40% in-kind contribution as a minimum. So for example, if you are awarded 50,000 at 80% full economic cost, this would require a 25,000 industry contribution made up of 5,000 in cash and 20,000 in kind. If the grant award was 20,000, this would require a 10,000 industry contribution with 2,000 of that in cash and 8,000 in kind. Business contributions are allowed to exceed these requirements, but please get in touch if you do have any questions over business partner contributions. So just to clarify, as the BBSRC contribution is 80%, your research organisation will make up the other 20%. And if you're awarded 50,000, the total project value would be 87,500, including the industry contribution. And similarly, if you were awarded 20,000, the total project cost would be 35,000. So what counts as an in-kind contribution? They should meaningfully contribute to the objectives of the project and must be justified in the application. For example, this could be hosting trials and undertaking analysis, providing access to equipment and experimental material, advice and expertise, or support for knowledge exchange, commercialization, and translation. Of course, there are many more examples that we would expect, and you're not limited to the list given here. To apply for the grant, you must use our joint electronic submission system. So first you select new document and BBSRC is the council. This is a standard proposal and a standard scheme. And then in call type mode, select Crop Pest and Diseases 2022. We ask that you prefix your proposal title with either horticulture or arable to help us with panel selection. Along with the JES form, we require the following documents: a case for support of up to 4 pages. As these grants are smaller, we want to highlight that the case for support document is shorter to reflect this. Justification for resources of 1 page, CVs for all named applicants and named research staff only, and they will need to be a maximum of 2 pages each. You will need a letter of support from any project partners with no page limit, and an eligibility form of up to half a side of A4 submitted as other attachment. A little more detail on the case for support. The case for support should outline the following: the scientific case and strategic value of your project, the timeliness and potential impact of the project, the challenge that is being addressed, an overview of how your proposed activities will progress towards solving the challenge, and a work plan if desired. You should also include something about the role of your industry partner and the nature of the collaboration within your case for support. We're running standard eligibility rules for this call, so this means you must be based at a UK institution eligible for funding from UKRI. For example, a UK higher education institution, a research council institution, a UKRI approved independent research organisation, or a UKRI approved public sector research establishment. Further, you must be employed by or scheduled to move to one of the above before submission and be lecturer level or equivalent. If you have any queries relating to eligibility, then please email eligibility@bbsrc.ukri.org as seen on this screen. Please have a look on the Funding Finder page for the call for further information about UKRI standard, terms and conditions for research grants, responsible innovation, international collaboration, equality, diversity and inclusion, guidance on journal-based metrics, and intellectual property and collaboration agreements. Please note that you must have a signed collaboration agreement between partners before starting. So I'm now going to hand over to James, who is going to go through the application assessment process.
Thank you very much, Mary. And again, thanks to our speakers earlier on, and thanks to everyone who's taking part. So I have a few slides now just to talk through the application process itself. So we'll get straight into it. So the first point to make is that we will be assessing applications by panel review only this time. So this means that applications will not go through an external peer review stage. This means there will be no rebuttal stage for you to have to work through. The reason for this is that this calls for small rewards, so we've worked to simplify the application and assessment process. We're planning to convene 2 review panels, one for arables and another for horticulture. This will hopefully enable us to have enough expertise on both panels to cover the full breadth of the scope for all the different crop species that we're expecting. The panel members will be experts in crop protection in a very broad sense, and we will try to match their expertise as closely as possible to your proposal. That being said, we always advise that you write your proposal in a way that an expert viewer who is perhaps not a specialist in your specific subject area can still understand the proposal. Final 2 points on this slide. We will aim to inform applicants of the assessment outcome during November. If it's taking a little bit longer, then we will let applicants know in advance. And final, a really crucial point here, which is that all of the proposals will be assessed against the published criteria. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have 4 published criteria in total, and this is drawn from the standard assessment criteria that BBSRC uses. The 2 primary assessment criteria are on your screen on the slide at the moment, and these will be scientific quality and industrial relevance. We're seeking applications that score well on both of these criteria. It follows that if a project is high on the scientific quality, but perhaps low on industrial relevance or vice versa, then they're much less likely to be funded. So we're looking for projects that balance both of these needs. The first criteria, which is scientific quality, relates to, again, just that scientific excellence standard that we're looking for. We'll be asking questions like whether the proposal explores a worthwhile and interesting area. Is the experimental design able to address the questions or issues that are being raised? And will the project meaningfully progress the area overall? Also note that value for money will be assessed as part of this criteria, and that's in terms of the appropriate justification of proposed activities. Second criteria will be industrial and stakeholder relevance. So for this one, we're looking for a really clear justification that the proposed project will deliver outputs that are meaningful for farmers, growers, and the wider sector. As part of developing the core, as we've mentioned previously, we've been working with AHDB to develop a list of pest and disease targets that are of significant interest to farmers and growers. This list can be downloaded from the call page under the additional information section, and we strongly recommend applicants to check it before making your application. If your pest or disease target isn't on that list, then we will still likely accept your proposal, but we would advise that you take care to fully justify why your preferred target is relevant to the sector. It's worth noting that the call does require industry partners who in turn have to submit letters of support. So you might want to ask those industry partners to use those letters to further explain that industrial relevance. A final point here is that the appropriateness and quality of any in-kind contributions from those business partners will also be considered as part of that industrial relevance score. As Mary said, we do want to be as flexible as we possibly can about what in-kind contributions could count, but we are looking for contributions that genuinely enhance the project and which meaningfully build the collaboration between all the different partners. So this can include translation, knowledge exchange, commercialization, access to materials, hosting field trials, anything that's going to really help the project succeed. Next slide, please. Okay, so our final two slides are timeliness and potential impact, and then capability to deliver. So starting with the first one, this call is for small rewards of £50,000 rather than the standard BBSSC research grants of say 300 to 800K. So there's very much a sense of proportionality in terms of what can realistically be achieved. So we would ask that you please make sure your project goals are realistic, but still purposeful, tangible, and ambitious. The final bullet point here is really important. We're not expecting that any of these projects will necessarily be the end point of a research program, but they may initiate a program or be a crucial step in translating previous, more fundamental research into application. So projects that really detail how this particular award would enable them to progress in the longer term, I think are more likely to receive a higher score for this criteria. The final one here is capability to deliver. This is very much focused on the actual research team itself. It's essentially asking whether the correct expertise is present to achieve the proposed research objectives. So a final word here on the assessment process is that we will be briefing the panel that these projects are intended to be enabling awards and connecting awards. So it follows that we're very happy with with a high success rate this time round. We will be briefing the panel that that's the case. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're now moving on to the call scope itself. Hopefully the presentations from our two speakers earlier on, and thanks again to Toby and Roma for that. Hopefully these have given you a good sense of the overall strategic narrative and purpose. So I'm really going to focus in on the published challenge areas that we're looking for. And just to point out, these challenge areas are not intended to be overly prescriptive or exclusionary. We're expecting that projects could tackle multiple challenges at the same time. They may take really imaginative approaches that we hadn't considered when we were drawing up the call. What we do ask, though, is that if your study or your project is going to be significantly different from one of these challenge areas, that you make sure it's really well justified in terms of how it fits into that overall strategic purpose for the call. So the first challenge is probably the one you would most expect from a BBSSC call. We're interested in proposals that will explore the fundamental biology of pests and diseases, including the full range of their life cycles, interactions, mechanisms with the wider kind of agricultural cropping system that they're part of. All of this with a view to developing better control measures, strategies, approaches in the long term. Prevention and biosecurity is also a very strong interest, again, grounded in the biosciences, but considering how we prevent pest and disease incidents and proliferation. Next slide, please. So on a similar theme, detection and forecasting is very much in scope. Past experience is that successful applications that address this theme will really think about how that detection, how that forecasting will enable farmers and growers to take action that's meaningful in actually addressing the pest and disease threat. Novel controls are also a very important area that are in scope. We're hoping for proposals that will develop new approaches to controlling pest diseases, and this is very much in the wider context of the challenges with conventional and existing chemical controls. Building on that, we are very interested in proposals that are seeking to develop integrated pest management approaches, and this was very much identified as being an area of very strong interest to industry when we were doing the consultation work to develop the strategic narrative for this call. So proposals that develop or validate combinatorial strategies or solutions are again very welcome. There we go. Next slide, please. So the final slide from me in this section at least is just a reminder to please check the strategic guidance for applicants document, which can be downloaded from the additional information section of the web page where the call is hosted. So we've mentioned a few times that there is this list of target pests and diseases, which is informed by the UK National Risk Register that AHDB has developed. This is the document that sets that out essentially for you as an applicant. We'll be briefing the panel to use this as a reference document. So if the pest or disease target is listed on there, that should really be very helpful if you're looking to get a high score in that industrial relevance area. However, the list is not exclusionary, as we said before. So please do get in touch with us if you want to explore a pest or disease target that isn't directly on the list. Okay, and I think with that, that's my section finished. We now have a talk from Jenna Watts from AHDB, who will be going through that final piece of the scope, those pest and disease targets, in a bit more detail. Thanks, Mary.
No problem. Thank you very much, James.
Hello, my name is Jenna Watts. I'm the head of crop health and IPM at AHDB. Over the next 10 minutes or so, I will introduce AHDB resources on pests and diseases, including where research gaps have been identified to improve integrated pest management on farm. The continued loss of plant protection products and rising levels of resistance means that the conventional crop protection toolbox is shrinking. This, together with environmental considerations, means there is a real need to utilise non-chemical options and target any chemical inputs according to need. Integrated pest management, or IPM, can be confusing with a lot of information available from different sources. To simplify this area and approaches available to use on farm, AHDB has developed the simple mantra of prevent, detect, control. Starting with prevent, this begins with an assessment of risk based on knowledge of a likely occurrence. For example, strategies here could include improved hygiene measures. Cultural and genetic approaches could also be adopted to reduce the risk or incidence of a pest, weed or disease outbreak. Detect. Once the cropping season is underway, monitoring is critical, and alongside crop walking, the use of smart tools for predicting pest presence and abundance can improve responsiveness to an emerging threat. With this knowledge, an informed decision can be made about the need to control a pest, weed or disease. Control. When control is necessary, an integrated toolbox of control options, both chemical and non-chemical, can be deployed to manage a pest, weed or disease epidemic. Pest and disease research targets have been identified for cereals, oilseeds, horticulture and potato crops. These priorities have been identified following a process of risk assessment, both with and without current mitigation, horizon scanning, and identification of research gaps following previous AHDB funded research and reviews. For cereals and oilseeds, the details of current and previous AHDB funded research are available on the AHDB website. The AHDB Horticulture and Potatoes Archive website contains information and data collected by research tools and services that AHDB provided to horticulture and potato levy payers prior to April 2022. Targets have been split into two groups. Firstly, those affecting cereals and oilseeds, and secondly, those affecting horticulture and potatoes. Web links are provided on the final slide of this presentation. Two key references that evaluate non-chemical control options available to growers and farmers are recent reviews, both of which were led by ADAS and are or will be published on the AHDB websites. Firstly, a review of arable crops on enabling the uptake of IPM in UK arable rotations, which was completed in 2021. This review identified key opportunities to develop non-chemical control strategies for broadacre crops based on factors including effectiveness, strength of evidence, and on-farm practicalities including cost and ease of implementation. This report is available on the AHDB website as Cereals and Oilseeds Research Review number 98. An additional review on non-broadacre crops was completed prior to April 2022 and will be published on the AHDB Horticulture and Potatoes archive website. Reductions in the availability of insecticides and resistance issues have increased the need to adopt IPM practices. There is also increased recognition of the role of natural enemies and beneficial insects and the need to protect them. There are a range of approaches available to farmers and growers, including the use of resistant varieties and decision support tools to target any chemical applications. However, for some important pests, research gaps remain. Aphids are identified as a priority across a range of different crops as vectors of various viruses. As an example, several IPM strategies have been identified for the control of aphids in apples, for which there is strong evidence. However, for other options, such as the use of undersowing, companion cropping, or the physical exclusion of aphids, less is known. Increasing knowledge of these options gives potential for greater uptake of IPM on farm. Monitoring and trapping are important components of pest management programs, especially when used alongside treatment thresholds. However, it is essential that thresholds are based on robust data and understanding. There is also potential for decision support tools to improve management of a number of arable and horticulture pests on farm. A major challenge for oilseed rape is the threat from cabbage stem flea beetle, which can make growing oilseed rape unviable for some. Non-chemical methods are needed, and whilst there is ongoing research on some of these methods, aspects which are easy for a farmer to implement, such as the use of non-cropped areas, still need more evidence. For cereals and oilseeds, withdrawal and the development of resistance to key chemistry means that it is essential to increase the uptake of integrated management solutions. The economically important disease Septoria tritici has been shown to have a high capacity to evolve resistance to fungicides with different modes of action. Likewise, the barley disease Ramularia has developed resistance to many existing modes of action. Product withdrawals have also impacted on the control of diseases such as wheat yellow rust using the traditional toolkit. For many diseases, varietal resistance is available, which offers an effective method of non-chemical disease control. However, resistance needs to be durable. Disease populations are dynamic, and recent history has shown that some diseases, such as wheat yellow and brown rust, can change rapidly so that single gene varietal resistance is no longer effective. Use of varietal blends, where different varieties with different characteristics are sown in a mix, can provide opportunities. There is also a need to reduce and eliminate any trade-offs between disease resistance and other characteristics, such as yield or quality. Decision support tools, which have been robustly validated, are also an opportunity to optimize disease control. Gaps in tools for decision support tools also includes greater integration into commercial use. For example, more effective pre-planting soil testing is needed for fusarium control in field vegetable crops, such as onions. I hope that this has given you a good overview of the pest and disease challenges faced by UK farmers and growers. This slide shows links to our key information, including cereals and oilseeds publications, research reviews, and the recommended lists which contain information on current varietal resistance. The AHDB Horticulture and Potatoes archive website contains information and data collected by the research tools and services that AHDB provided to horticulture and potato levy payers prior to April 2022. Many thanks for your attention.
Many thanks to Jenna for providing that extra detail for us on the list of crop pests and diseases that are of interest to farmers and growers. So we're now going to go into another 5-minute screen break before James will take you through some other funding opportunities, and then we will start the Q&A. So please use this time to submit any questions you have into the chat box. We will restart at 2. Welcome back, everyone. So as I said, James is now going to take you through some other funding opportunities which are available through UKRI.
Fantastic, thank you, Mary. Yep, so we have just a couple of slides now, basically just to introduce some other funding that's happening at the moment that might be of interest to applicants in this call. While I'm speaking, please do feel free to keep on popping any questions there in the chat function below, because after this, we'll get directly into that Q&A session. So the first one that I wanted to just briefly highlight is a new research starter pilot expression of interest round from the Farming Innovation Programme. So this is a bigger program that's funded by DEFRA and delivered by the Transforming Food Production team within UKRI. This current call makes funding of up to 56k available for industry-only led applications to investigate early stage solutions for productivity, sustainability, and resilience. So if you're joining us today and you're from a business and you'd like to lead a proposal, which is a very similar value to today's crop and pest call, then please do check out this opportunity too. It's very, very complementary to what we're doing today. There we go, next slide, please. We're always really keen at BBSLC to raise awareness of the standard mechanisms that we host for collaborative research. In particular, this means the Industrial Partnership Award and the Link Award, which are both available and supported through our responsive mode mechanism. The big advantage of this is that it means that anyone can apply at any time in any area of our remit for funding to work with businesses on an innovation-focused research project, which very much includes crop health as a priority area for BBSLC. IPAs are funded at a 10 to 90% ratio, with 90% being the public funding from BBSLC, whereas the Link Awards are matched funding. Although the industry contributions can be in kind and will quite often for this area include things like hosting field trials. So please get in touch with us if you'd be interested in these opportunities too. Next slide, please. Okay, so building on the IPA and Link mechanisms, we're also offering BBSLC Prosperity Partnership Awards for the very first time. This is actually a very well-established mechanism that's been used by EPSLC for a number of years, and it's now available for bioscience using businesses too. These awards enable larger projects and collaborations that will significantly advance established partnerships. The call launch webinar for this particular program actually took place yesterday, so a recording should be made available on the website very shortly. However, please do feel free to get in contact with us again if we can help you out with this opportunity as well. Next slide, please. Thanks. Finally, I just wanted to mention the new IQA pre-accelerator program. This is, again, a very new initiative, but it's very quickly developed to become one of the UK's leading bioscience pre-accelerators. It makes rapid awards of up to 250k available to enable research to move out of the lab. The funding is available to validate that commercially viable products are also suitable for the marketplace. It includes lots of additional support, including training, mentoring, and is currently open for applications. And that's the final slide in that section, which brings us essentially to the end of the presentation section of the webinar. So thanks so much everyone for taking part and talking and engaging with us in the question box so far. So we move on to the Q&A session, and the format essentially is that Mary will read out any questions in that chat box. I'll have a go at answering them, and then Mary will add in the bits that I've missed, essentially. What we'll try and do is develop an FAQ document as well from any questions that we have today, plus the previous webinar that we had on Tuesday. We will try and answer all the questions we can, but if we do come across one that we don't quite have the answer for right now, we'll commit upfront to getting back to you by email using your contact details. Okay, so Mary, do we have any questions that we want to pick up on?
So we've had a couple of questions so far in the chat that we've answered in the chat. Yep. So possibly we could go through those just again whilst people are thinking. So we had a question about whether business partners should be included as project partners or co-Is.
Absolutely. So I think I responded to that one just by saying that we will be following the standard approach for BVSLC awards, which I think means that they get included as project partners, but there's a lot more detail and guidance available in the BVSLC grants guide.
Excellent. And the other question we had was, would potatoes come under arable or horticulture? And yes, James kindly answered that they would be horticulture.
Absolutely, yeah. So this time around, potatoes are obviously, a very significant crop in the UK, and absolutely, important to BVSLC and something that we do recognise. For the sake of, administrative purposes, we're going to put them in that horticulture area this time around.
Okay.
Okay.
So another question has just come in. Is there an intention for there to be a larger scale-up follow-up call?
That's a great question. So crop health is a really important area for BVSLC. It's something that's really crucial for us. One of the purposes of this call is to try to broaden out the range of crop pests and diseases that we support within BVSLC, try to encourage the research base that we've been able to build up over the long term, free sustained funding for this area, again, to engage in sort of really strategically interesting targets for the sector. So it's an area that's of real importance to us. We are absolutely thinking about what we can do to continue to engage with the area and to provide that kind of support as well. I don't have any immediate time frame in terms of future calls, but it's absolutely something that's important to us. This is pump priming funding, and we're hoping that by design it should fit directly into our responsive mode mechanisms, things like the Farming Innovation Programme from DEFRA. And also hopefully in the future, future calls that we would hope to launch in this space. Hope that answers that as sort of directly as I can at this point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Another question. Would AHDB be considered as an industry project partner on the call?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So HDB and all the other levy bodies, for the purposes of BVSLC funding, their funds obviously come from that levy that the industry pays. So on that basis, we would consider any kind of contributions from them to effectively be business contributions, if that makes sense. So we would absolutely consider HDB to be a very valid and very welcome industry partner on the call.
Perfect. So no more questions so far. Oh. How much are legume diseases important for this call?
Yep, absolutely. So legumes are, again, a really important crop for the UK. I'm sure we've all noticed how there's been a huge increase in demand from the kind of consumer end for things like plant-based protein, huge interest in actually increasing the presence of legumes within the arable rotation as well. So there's a number of legume pests and diseases identified within that list of targeted pest and priority species. Again, very much a crop that we're aware of at BVSLC as having that strategic importance, and we will continue to support it, not least through collaborating with things like the DEFRA PC GINs, for example, and other initiatives that are happening in this space.
Great, thank you. Just while we wait, in case anyone has any more questions, we could maybe answer a couple that we had yesterday that were quite common questions. Can projects extend past 6 months, keeping the budget below 50K?
Absolutely. So we essentially had to put a number into the website there to actually advertise the call. From the consultation that we did before we actually launched it, when we were actually setting up this mechanism, it seemed that for most people, 6 months was about the right kind of maximum duration that they would look at. But if you do have a project where you'd like to actually extend it out longer, that is something that we would certainly consider. The really key date there is the very end date, which is the 31st of December. 2023. So all projects definitely need to end by that date, but the duration could absolutely vary around that 6 month mark.
Thanks for clarifying. Another question has just come in. Is it possible to have more than one industry partner on the project?
Absolutely. Yeah, we would definitely welcome consortias. We would definitely welcome different partnerships that maybe extend down the supply chain, bringing in different perspectives and different contributions from different areas. So absolutely, yeah.
Okay, there's no more questions coming into the chat at the moment.
Brilliant. So maybe what we should do is, oh, there we go. Oh, it just says thank you for Great. Perhaps what we do then is if we do another 5-minute break just for people to type in more, if that makes sense. And then we'll just come back and try and answer any kind of questions after that. If there are any, then we will wrap up the session, if that's okay.
Okay, that sounds great.
Great.
So yeah, we'll be back at 35.
Excellent. Thank you all. See you in a bit.
See you in a bit. So it doesn't look like we have any more questions. So I think we will wrap up the webinar here. Thank you everyone for coming. You can find my contact details on the screen now, so please feel free to contact me if you do find that you have questions during the application process. And we will be uploading the webinar and the FAQ document online early next week.
Thank you all very much. Thanks again to Mary for organising. And yeah, looking forward to getting some fantastic applications. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you again for coming.